What's going on, team? It's Caddy with Money Vesting. I hope that you all are having an amazing day. So in this video, I will give you guys an update on Workhorse, ticker symbol Wkhs, and we'll go over their second quarter earnings that the company reported this morning before the market opened. And I also attended their earnings call at 10 a.m. Eastern, so it was a 1-hour call where the CFO and the CEO essentially went over the results and also gave us some future guidance. So we'll talk about that as well. So in addition to that, I'll also be doing a technical analysis and giving you guys a technical update on the stock, where it's trading and where those key support and resistance levels are going to be. And I also want to address some really interesting data related to the level 2 and the order book for Workhorse stock. So as always, if you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like. It really helps out with the channel. Also, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future market updates and videos related to investing and or technical breakdowns. So this right here is going to be Workhorse Group's second quarter results for 2020. And before we jump into the revenue and the EPS, I want to quickly go over this right here. Is their production and delivery target for the 2020 year is going to be 300 to 400 vehicles, which during the earnings call, the management team essentially reassured that they are on track to hitting this target. Now, in terms of the revenue and the EPS, they were in line with the estimate. So they reported a net loss of close to 12 cents per share, which was also the expectations from the analysts. But in terms of the revenue, they essentially reported $92,000 in revenue versus the $300,000 that was expected by the analysts. So they definitely missed revenue estimates by close to 69 or 70%, but they were right in line with the EPS estimates. So this right here essentially goes over month by month what exactly is going on in terms of the operational highlights. So Workhorse strategic partner Lordstown Motors entered into a business combination agreement with Diamond Peak Holding, a special purpose acquisition company, SPAC, and this will result in LMC, which is Lordstown Motors, being publicly listed company on NASDAQ under ticker symbol RIDE. You guys know from all of my previous Workhorse updates that this was a potential catalyst for the company because they own 10% equity stake in Lordstown along with a 1% commission on the first 200,000 trucks sold. So that's exactly what they mentioned here again, that Workhorse will retain its 10% ownership stake in the merged company, which is estimated at approximately $160 million based on a $1.6 billion valuation, and that's exactly what I mentioned in my previous Workhorse update. So in July, they essentially obtained HVIP eligibility from CARB, qualifying certain Workhorse C-Series models for monetary vouchers and credits for up to $50,000 per vehicle. Again, this is one of the updates that I had addressed in I think my second or third Workhorse video that you're more than welcome to watch. And in my last video, I mentioned this 20 C1000 trucks from E-Trucks. That's the order that Workhorse received. So they don't mention how much this order is actually worth, but like I said in my previous video, it could be estimated to be around $700,000 to $1 million in potential future revenue for the company. And again, they closed a $70 million financing through a senior secured convertible note with a single institutional investor, and that is the note can be converted into a common stock at $19 per share. So that's the caveat with this convertible note. So if you were to kind of scroll down again, in July, they delivered 2 C1000 electric step vans for initial use through the Ryder system. Ryder is another one of their really big customers, potentially a big customer, that can grow their orders with Workhorse along with E-Trucks, which is also one of their customers right now. So this right here are going to be their second quarter 2020 results. Again, they reported $92,000 in revenue compared to $5,500 in the second quarter of 2019. So that's definitely a huge jump quarter over quarter. But again, they missed expectations, which were at $300,000. So cost of goods sold increased to $1.5 million from $930,000 in the second quarter of 2019. And this was mostly related to the materials for the C-Series production, and then research and development, which is the R&D expense, increased to $1.6 million from $1.2 million compared to the second quarter of 2019. Scrolling down, you can see that this right here is probably their biggest expense, which is the interest expense, which netted at close to $124.3 million compared to the net interest expense at around $15.9 or $16 million same time last year, right? So quarter over quarter, that's a huge jump going from $16 million to over $124.3 million. And you'll see that being reflected in the net loss for the company. But they essentially put out a note, and the CFO also addressed that on the call, that it should be noted that this significant increase of $108.4 million in interest expense was almost exclusively due to the change in fair value of our convertible note, and the mark-to-market adjustment for some non-dilutive warrants issued to a lender. Now, if you read further, it essentially says that both of these GAAP adjustments are non-cash, so this is a non-cash expense, and primarily dependent on the underlying stock components of financial instruments. These large adjustments were the result of a stock price at $17.39, which was reported on June 30th, compared to $1.81 on March 31st. And primarily to these non-cash adjustments, our net loss was $131.3 million compared to a net loss of $20.1 million in the second quarter of 2019. A better indication of operating performance would be the loss from operations, which was $7 million this quarter compared to $4.1 million in the second quarter of 2019. Alright guys, so this right here is going to be their statement of operations, or income statement for that matter. You guys can see the revenue is sitting at $92,000, which is significantly up from a year ago, same quarter last year, when it was at just about $5,500. But nonetheless, it's still under $100,000, and they did miss expectations of close to $300,000, which was the estimate from the analyst. As far as the cost of goods sold, you can see that it's at $1.5 million, up from $930,000 about a year ago. And that's still pretty significant in my opinion to generate just about $92,000. They are burning through $1.5 million in cost of goods sold, which is why their gross loss is at $1.4 million. So that's something that they really need to control and manage in order to achieve economies of scale moving forward and become more efficient in the future. Now moving forward, this right here again is going to be the loss for operations, which was just under $7 million versus $4.1 million same time last year. And this right here is going to be the interest expense that we talked about earlier. Again, it's very eye-catching at $124 million, up from just $16 million same quarter last year, which is why their net losses sit at $131 million, up from just $20 million same quarter last year. So it's not a big concern right now. In my opinion, I feel like it's still manageable at this point, but we want to keep a close eye on this number. If it keeps ballooning, and if the interest expense, even though it's a non-cash expense, if it keeps ballooning moving forward, then it's going to be really a cause for concern for most investors that are in Workhorse stock. So this right here is going to be their balance sheet, and cash is sitting at just under $27 million versus $23.8 million in the same time last year. So they're definitely up in cash and cash equivalents. Total current assets sitting at just about $35 million. One thing I'm not too sure about is this right here, which they mentioned their investment in Lordstown Motor Corporation, investment in LMC, and that sits at $13 million. I'm not quite sure if they haven't updated that position yet, because they did address the fact that since Lordstown Motors valuation is coming at $1.6 billion, their position is probably going to be worth close to $160 million. So I'm not sure if that's actually going to sit in the balance sheet under assets, but right now it does say investment in LMC close to $13 million. If they include this valuation or this position at close to $160 million, then obviously their total assets are going to increase, and then it's going to be a lot more than their total liabilities. But right now you can see the total current assets are $35 million versus the total current liabilities at just about $105 million. So it's not the healthiest balance sheet, but again, this is a company that is just getting started in a very niche and a specific EV space. So they're just starting to get orders and ramping up production as well. So now we're going to jump over to my TradingView platform to look at the stock price, and I also want to highlight some really interesting things related to the level 2 and order book, and also talk about some key support and resistance levels for the stock. Alright guys, so before we jump into the technical analysis, I want to quickly play a small clip from the CEO when he addresses the update on the USPS contract.
I'll provide a brief comment, as we always do, with respect to the U.S. Postal Service Next Generation Delivery Vehicle Program. As many of you are well aware, under our NDA, Workhorse is only able to provide information which is already in the public domain. As has been the case throughout this process, any further information or announcements will be issued by the U.S. Postal Service. We appreciate the continued interest that we are receiving and will provide updates to the market as we are able. We do not have any updates to share at this time. That concludes my prepared remarks. Thank you all for your time this morning.
So you guys saw that there are no updates right now, and the USPS has all the information, and they are going to be the ones to make the announcement. And of course, it's going to help Workhorse if they were able to win a sizable portion of the contract, because that's obviously going to help them with the revenues and economies of scale moving forward. Now, there was also another question that was asked to the management team, whether if they were to win the contract, do they have the manpower and the resources in order to take the production requirements for the USPS contract, and the management team essentially mentioned that they will be using part of Lordstown's facilities in order to produce as many vehicles as USPS demands, and they have the resources and they are testing other things as well in order to meet those requirements if they were to win the USPS contract. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the order book for Workhorse. So I want to highlight some really interesting support levels for Workhorse based on level 2 data. So these 4 screenshots essentially represent the order book or the level 2 for Workhorse stock, all the way from $14 up to $15.50 to $16 level. And you will see 2 sides here, the bids and the asks. The bids, of course, represent the buyers and the asks represent the sellers. And some of the things that I really want to highlight is going to be right at the $14 mark. You can see that there's such a large order just sitting there at $14. And if the price were to hit that level, it's expected that that buyer or that bid will essentially get executed and filled at that $14 price, which is why we have seen from all my previous Workhorse updates why there's such a strong support right at the $14 level, which we have recognized in my previous update. Now similarly, you'll see strong buying and strong bids sitting at $14.50, $14.80, $14.90, all the way to $15. So that right there is going to be the bid and the ask, and the difference between the two is obviously the spread. But the bids I wanted to highlight because I really found it interesting that it's sitting at such strong levels at $14, $14.50 with such large orders. Now, again, that doesn't mean that those orders are going to stay there forever. They could very well disappear. Those are probably from institutional investors. If they don't see any value in this company moving forward, obviously that's not going to be the case, and that support could potentially be broken if there's enough supply and selling for this stock. So that I wanted to address that and bring to your guys' attention because I think it's really interesting to look at. But that being said, now we're going to quickly go over some of the key support and resistance levels that we have been following up with. And again, the $14 level, the green rectangle you guys see is going to be the strong support, where Workhorse stock has obviously bounced off of multiple times. But moving forward, this right here is the huge sell-off due to earnings, and this right here is going to be pre-market at around 9 a.m. So you can see how August 10th, 9 a.m. we sell off all the way to lows of $14.80. So this right here was the low. So if I were to go over to the 5-minute chart, and if you go over to pre-market, you guys will notice that we sell off all the way down to $14.80, and then we get bought up towards the open, right? So as soon as the market's open at 9:30 a.m., we hit a high of $16.95 to $17, and then kind of sell off throughout the rest of the day. But another thing that I want to point out very, very quickly is going to be this price point right here at $14.80, which is what this represents. The low for this candle pre-market, and we saw the order flow where there's such a large order sitting at $14.80. Moving forward, you guys will notice that again we hit that price point at 1 p.m. right on the dot. So low for this candle, $14.80, and then we push up towards the end, and we do not break below $14.80 just yet. So you can see how low for the day, if you look at the day's range, $14.80. So that right there is some very simple price actions for us to look at, and how there's such a strong bid sitting at $14.80, which is going to be our demand and our strong support. And does that mean that it's not going to break below that level? Of course not. Anything can happen in the markets, and it can very well break below the $14.80 level. But that's just something for us to make sure that we are aware and where the next support and resistance is going to be. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like. It really helps out with the channel. Also, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future market updates and videos related to investing and or technical breakdowns. As always, happy investing, and I will see you guys in the next video.